All right. Welcome back to Chant It Down. I'm your host, Loomis. ChantItDownRadio.com is the website. This is episode 280. And our oldest writings and drawings in civilization speak of giants. It's part of our antiquity, and tribes in many parts of the world speak of them in their own oral histories. I've said long on this show that Homo sapiens sapiens were not the only intelligent life in history. It appears that we live in a multi-populated universe, and from Gilgamesh to the Bible saying there were giants in the earth in those days, to Lovelock Cave and the Paiute culture, the cylinder seals of the Anunnaki showing large beings with small beings. Giants were said to have built the megaliths in Malta, and some say that after the flood, the Younger Dryas, the giants perished with the flood, but that's definitely not true. And you can find lore all over the world and really into the 1800s. But what I did not know is that of the giants of Aruba. With me today is Heather Arnold, an expert on just that. Heather graduated from Syracuse University and had a 15-year career in television. She left the industry for pharmaceutical sales and took a sharp turn down the rabbit hole of giants when visiting Aruba. Heather has done major research into the history of these islands and found that these giants constructed megaliths on ley lines, had elongated skulls, and ruled the island before known history. And this is a really fascinating topic, and it seems like a missing chapter of our history. So I'm excited to have you on today. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, that's quite a topic that you got going on there. I guess my first question for you is, how do you go from like pharmaceutical sales to explorer of a fringe historical topic? I mean, were you always interested in this kind of stuff, or did the rabbit hole just open up and you went down, or how did that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always been interested in ancient history. I traveled all over the world, such as yourself, starting at a young age. Since I was in the single digits, I was traveling all over, and through my travel, especially to India, and certain cultures where you see very intricate carvings and alignments to celestial events, and you see this repeated over and over and over and over globally. It was always fascinating to me. And so what happened was, I was living in Manhattan. I was in pharmaceutical sales, and I ended up coming to Aruba and going on a rock climbing expedition, and fell and broke my back in two places. So I couldn't do my job anymore. I couldn't live in Manhattan. You have to walk everywhere. Although I had a vehicle, it was very, very painful recovery. It took over a year. So I decided, why not just go to Aruba and start a tour company? So I packed up everything once my lease was up, and I came to Aruba, where I am now. I started my tour company, and I wanted to get information on and have historically accurate tours. My whole goal was to have historically accurate tours. And it was so difficult to find out the history of Aruba. It was really shrouded in mystery. There's a lot of ideas that were put forth, I think, from the Dutch and the Spanish who were here before, maybe to disenfranchise the local population. But it was through my analysis of the archaeological reports, the peer-reviewed journal entries, field notes, photos of archaeological digs, not only here in Aruba, but also on Bonaire and Curacao, which was all one island at one time, and all has evidence of giants on all three islands. I realized, wow, there were giants here. I mean, the archaeological record, it states that these people were giants. They're very difficult to get a hold of. They're very expensive. They're very cloistered. So I have now amassed probably 100 or so field report studies, journal entries, conference notes, etc., on the giants, all written by archaeologists and researchers here on the island, going back to the early 1800s, when the real study of this started to go on. But it was my stumbling across Amerigo Vespucci's notes that really intrigued me and moved me further when he talked about how he landed here in 1499, and he had heard about the mainland, the giants from the mainland. Locals whom he had a relationship through Christopher Columbus. So when he came here, he documents very succinctly, very deliberately, very detailed his encounter with the giants, what they look like, what the weaponry was, how tall they were, how they were afraid for their lives on that day. Mind you, the week before, they had just been on an island off the coast of Colombia where they saw a human turning on a spit in a fire, but they were still more afraid of the giants. And it's actually one of the last entries of his time here that Vespucci makes. He said, "I thought I was going to die that day." And then his last entry is, "I called this island the island of the giants due to the large statured people there." So once I saw that, and then saw etchings of what it was like when Vespucci met the giants, and started to look at the map, where the original map, the Mappus Mundi of the New World, was done in 1502, where Aruba and Curacao are marked as the islands of the giants. Bonaire was not discovered at that time. I realized, wow, this is really something. I mean, this is incredible. And there's a very nice archaeology museum here. It's actually a sister museum to the Smithsonian, which you can imagine the problems that could potentially cause. I think that's going on here. And one of the head archaeologists I started dating. He's my ex-boyfriend now, but we were dating, and he disclosed to me a lot that he knew of the giants on this island, but told me that he couldn't talk about it because he would be discredited amongst his peers. So he did funnel information to me, which I share with you now. So I'm the human punching bag for all the experts, while he hides behind his degrees in the nice air-conditioned museum. And so, but I'm thankful for the time, because it really further confirmed that there were giants here. And because when you hear something like my own boyfriend at the time wasn't disclosing this information, you can see that that's just the tip of the cover-up. And so, and that's really motivated me to push forward. And every day I find more and more information about the giants on these 3 islands.
Wow. Yeah. So that's quite, we'll get into the cover-up because that's important. That's like documented proof. Amerigo Vespucci. Now that guy, I mean, do people dispute his claims on this? Are they thinking he's like nuts? Or, I mean, why would he make something like that up anyway in the first place? I don't know. Is that disputed amongst archaeologists? Like, oh, that was just some psychedelic trip he was on, or I don't know.
Yes. It's so funny you bring this up, because he wrote it's huge books. I mean, he was a voracious writer, and he considered his journey like he was reporting on what he was seeing. He took scientists with him on this trip. He took botanists, he took doctors, medical doctors. He took what we would term anthropologists. He took people to document all of what the people looked like, what they ate, where they lived, even their sexual practices he delved into. And so he does that systematically of a lot of the Caribbean islands he visited, including some in Central America, in South America on the mainland, and in Aruba, but he didn't visit Curacao, but he did visit Aruba first, which is also disputed, but it is 100% true. He was here first, not Curacao. It's the only entry in the whole book that is always said to be fake. Not anything else he said about the cannibals, about the shrunken heads, about, all these, how the people lived, what they said. All these other entries were totally fine. The one entry is about the islands of the giants, and everyone says, oh, it was a hoax. I even had a fellow researcher who's done no research on this. I won't mention his name. Just say no, no. This is fake. This story is fake. But you're falling for it too. It's the only disputed entry in the entire annals of his work,
Wow.
and it's ridiculous because it doesn't make sense. If you're going to say one story is fake, why then say the whole thing? Did he ever land here at all? Was he even in the New World? I mean, so
Yeah.
where do we draw the line? I think it's on purpose that people say, oh, it's fake, because that's part of the cover up. And so it's easy to say it's fake. We can't ask him. But if you look and read his book, which is very, very interesting for someone who's into history, I suggest it's in English. They have it translated to English. It's very interesting to read, and you do learn a lot about these people, how they were living in the early 1500s, late 1400s, and so AD. So, and what else is intriguing about this entry that archaeologists have confirmed in their own reports, which is so frustrating, is that there were giants living here at the same time as average statured people. So there were two communities of people living here. And so the archaeologists, who don't call the giants giants, they call them the archaics, they were said to have died out. And then mainland Cacateo Indians came over from Venezuela and then settled here. Well, the reality is they were living probably together. And we know that for a fact. Vespucci makes mention of it, and it's mentioned by the archaeologists. They were living together. I don't know if it was harmoniously. It didn't. It appears that the giants were in control. They were the dominant force on the islands, and they were in charge. They were probably the elite ruling class. There weren't a lot of them, but the ones that were there were huge people, and they were formidable, and people were going to listen to them, and they were here first. So, so it's very frustrating when people just pull out that story because it mentions giants and say that it's fake when there's so much archaeological evidence that folds into Vespucci's story. And archaeologists do mention it. But now, for some reason, the archaeologists seem to have amnesia. They don't even recognize their own studies from their peers. Some of them even Aruban, and some of them even their own studies. It's just baffling. But I continue to move forward and find more and more evidence about their existence and how, quite frankly, how interesting they are.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And yes, it reminds me of how in Egypt the archaeologists take dynasties that they choose that existed, and then they ignore the ones that had the long lifespans, like in Zep-Tipi and all that. Like they just picked and choose which ones are real, and all those other ones they're fake. And it's they do that. They just this pick and choose, this cherry picking they do with all the things that are anomalies, because they want this tight, neat little package that fits their narrative, but yet it's we can't ignore these things, especially when you have something like giants, which is literally all over the world. I mean, like pretty much. You hear places, I'm still learning about places that have giants, and I'm sure you are as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think a lot of times also, I feel a large portion of archaeologists, sadly, are paid narrative pushers, and they are not paid to discover or uncover, but more to perpetuate the narrative. And I don't say all archaeologists, because I know archaeologists who are still in the field and enthusiastic and discovering, there's very few of those, but they do exist. I find it interesting that they can exist within the archaeological realm, because it's very hard to be open-minded like that. And most of these archaeologists who I do know, who do branch out and admit of the existence of things that are out of the narrative, are kind of shunned, marginalized to fringe, and that's just a tactic to not only just demoralize, but denigrate the message and make it so that no, don't listen to them. It's just fringe. They're not saying, it's just a conspiracy theory. And it's like, for example, I give the example of the Tucson artifacts. I don't know if you've ever been to the, I believe it's the Historical Museum in Tucson. I went there with Gary David to see the Tucson artifacts that are from trading of Jewish mariners from like 1000 AD or even earlier, who came over and was trading with the Hohokam native population then, and they found these markers, like these trade boundaries, where obviously they had worked out with the native population where they could trade, where their land could be, and they worked out some deal, and they even created a map showing how they came from Britannia, as they call it, and showing their little boat. And this is all on metal. It was found under the caliche, so it's very, very old. And these artifacts are just pushed in a corner, like in a display case in the corner, no real frills about it, kind of disregarded. And that's another way to kind of marginalize these artifacts that don't fit into the prescribed narrative. For example, in Bonaire. In Bonaire is the most complete giant skeleton, and it's on display. And it is a giant. I have contact with it's a museum run by the government of Bonaire, which is essentially the Dutch government, because the islands are all under the Dutch, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Okay. And I spoke to the government official who's in charge of that museum, and he said, no, that is a giant skeleton. And he is crumpled up in a little ball under a display case, pushed in the corner. I mean, it's just like crazy, just kind of, and it says that this is proposed to be a giant from the islands of the giants. And that was uncovered in 1970s. It was, the archaeological report was written in 1980, which confirmed it was a giant. But again, it was just smushed into a corner. It's smushed into a corner. And like, if you don't go actively to that back room to look for it, you would probably blast right by it and not even see it. So it's very disheartening. But I think the veils are falling. I think people are seeing things now, and really, I think they're not trusting the narrative so much. They're not trusting the storytellers as much, and doing their own research, which is really important and amazing.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people are distrusting the media, the government, everything now. And because I think because the internet's a double-edged sword, it allowed them some control on us, but it also allows us the freedom to do our thing and get more voices heard and stuff. So it's good and bad at the same time. But I do think that there is an unraveling of general trust in the authority of all the different parts of our organized society nowadays. And I think that's why an audience is growing for people like us that want to get out the truth on these matters,
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask though, there's an indigenous culture there. Is there any left that have stories of the giants or legends or anything? Because I don't hear much about indigenous in the Caribbean. I mean, maybe I'm wrong because I haven't been to that side of the world. Like I said, I could tell you loads about Polynesia and the South Pacific, but I don't know much about the Caribbean. So are the indigenous out there, is this in their lore, or do you know?
Well, so my daughter is Aruban. Her father is Aruban, so I did have her DNA tested, and it turned out she has mostly European, but she does have Native American DNA as well as African. So she came from her ancestry is from the slaves that were brought over from West Africa, and she still has that DNA in her, and she's 16, which is years old, which is incredible. So that Native American DNA was further analyzed in a 2012 2002 genetic study on the people of Aruba. Now, the people of Aruba specifically they chose were those who had never left the island. Their mother never left the island, their grandmother, and their great-grandmother. So they had to go back and find. There are a lot of people here who never left the island, so which is incredible and to me quite fascinating because I don't know. I just would, I mean, even to go to Bonaire or Curacao or South America, we're so close, but they never left the island. And they did the genetic study on them, and they determined that they have a DNA that is not modern. It's not from found anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
And they found that they attributed this ancient DNA to the archaic people, to the giants. And so I'm assuming my daughter still has that DNA in her. Now we did have an influx of the Venezuelan Cockatoo who came to Aruba later on, after or towards the waning of the giants, I believe. So there could be some of that DNA evidence also in my daughter as well. But the fact that the native population who had never left the island has this mysterious ancient DNA that's attributed scientifically to the archaic is actually quite interesting. So in that case, there is this type of genetic holdover that most Arubans don't even realize they have. And as well, some people tell stories to me of the local people of they had an uncle who was so big and large stature, he had huge hands and huge jaw, and a lot of the characteristics that you read on the early newspaper articles of when they would unearth these skeletons all over the United States, and they would mention like how large the jaw is and how big the shoulders were when they would uncover these skeletons. And that's kind of what I hear from some people who speak about relatives that they might have had, or before they were even born, they had one woman tells of an uncle who was so big they made him a boxer, and he went down to South America to box and was killing his opponents. So he had to stop boxing because he was just too powerful. And so you do hear stories like that about the giants. But other than that, they're really shrouded in mystery. They had left a lot of drawings, a lot of petroglyphs. There's tons of them. They were attributed by the archaeologists incorrectly to the later period Cockatoo, but now they have, with further analysis and as things are becoming more scientifically advanced, they are discovering that no, these are like maybe 7,000-year-old drawings, maybe even older. So there's a burial site, one of the largest in the Caribbean, right here, where there were unearthed 72 burials of giants, but there were more in the earth. So there's a lot of physical evidence still here, but in terms of the Cockatoo stories, we don't hear of the giants. But when you talk to the local people now, they'll speak of their relatives potentially being giants or were giants, and of course we have the archaeological evidence as well.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And I read that you said that they were a matriarchal population and they had elongated skulls. And these are even huge anomalies in the study of this kind of stuff, because if you go into the Paracas skulls, they don't seem like they were giants. But what is an interesting connection is Malta. When I went there, they have legends of giants, and they have elongated skulls with no sagittal suture mark on the top. So I find that there is some links to this, but the first time I've actually really heard giants with elongated skulls.
Yeah, so the giants here, and this has been documented by the archaeologists. So this is something the archaeological record shows repeats, because the archaeologists were hell bent on trying to attribute their cranial elongation to cranial deformation. So the cradle boarding, for example. And they found no evidence of cradle boarding. As a matter of fact, they found a baby, an infant, who had an elongated skull and was less than 6 months old. And so if you're going to do boarding, intentional elongation of the skull for a baby, it takes at least 6 months for that elongation to begin to appear. So this baby was born with this elongated skull. So these giants have elongated skulls. They obviously have had bigger brains. Their skulls went, instead of like the Paracas skulls, which I've seen in Peru, they go up. This elongation goes back. So because this elongation goes to the back, The way that their head is connected to their neck is in an entirely different place than modern humans to accommodate for this extra weight of their brain in the back. So there are other like anomalies to the giants where their ear sockets are, where their eye sockets are, to kind of accommodate this different body type. And their teeth, almost all of them are found with complete sets of teeth, which is really amazing. And they're worn down, so they had a very rough diet. We can only guess as to what they ate, but I know a lot of seafood, a lot of shellfish for sure. So yes, they did have elongated skulls. And the interesting part about this elongation was that it was recognized as something different and special, because in the burials of the giants, which I have a whole new theory about the burial of the giants, which is actually it's in a sense macabre, but I'm sure it was something which I haven't even ever publicly spoken about because I just realized it like 2 weeks ago. So they would, I think what happened was where the giant cemetery is, for example, just before this call, I went to visit it. So because it fills with water. So it is a dry lake bed, only maybe 2 months of the year. And that's pushing it. A month for sure. For the month of September, it's totally dry. And for the rest of the time, it's covered in water. So there was no way these burials could have been done when the lake is full. So what the skulls of the craniums of the giants were painted in ochre. The ochre was from locally sourced manganese. So this would be like a secondary burial. That's what the archaeologists say. So that they buried the people, then when they became bones, they dug them up again and then painted their skulls. And just the elongated part, some of them a little bit more, but most of them just the skulls were painted this ochre. My theory is that maybe they didn't have a secondary burial, because if you died in like January when it's rainy season, you cannot do a burial in January in the rainy season. What if you died in February or March or April? That lake doesn't dry up till September. So I personally think they collected the bodies in a way, and maybe like they were like the Parsi, they have the vultures, they have the birds, eat away at the bodies, or ashes to ashes type of mentality. And then when they became skeletal and were ready for the proper burial in September, that's when they colored the skulls. And I think it was a massive ritual of death. And I think that is what was going on. And it's something I'm actually going to mention to the archaeologists, who will probably steal my information and never give me credit like they do other things that I have told them. But as long as we keep moving forward with the education of the giants, I think that's really, I prefer to get credit, but we all suffer from having our work, uncredited from us, or if that's a word. But so I think that's what was happening. And so the giants themselves were recognized, the importance or the difference or the distinction of having these elongated skulls.
That's interesting. So have you seen these skulls in yourself, and did they have the sagittal suture mark on top or not?
They do. Yes, they do. So it could, I don't know, could it be a hybridization? We're not far from Peru. So, right. I mean, could there have been a mixing? That's to me, I think it's possible. Now, one of the archaeologists who's here, actually, he thinks that the giants were light skin and light hair and light eyes, which is quite interesting. So they weren't even what we would consider, indigenous looking in terms of Native American. They were more Caucasian, which is quite interesting. So, but I have seen the skulls. There's a whole, oh my gosh, finding this one report with pictures of the skulls that were unearthed from the cemetery here and brought to Curacao. I've been trying to track down these two skulls for years. I finally think I found them in their archaeology museum. They were supposed to be in another museum, but then they were missing. And when I was in Curacao in January, the owner of the curator of the Curacao Museum contacted the Archaeology Museum in Curacao, asked if they had the giant skulls, and they would neither confirm nor deny. So the mystery continues to deepen. So that is something I'm going to be going back to Curacao and make an appointment and hopefully see the skulls. Then, of course, the bone air skeleton. I have seen that many times. I tried to go and check on him as much as I can, and he has an elongated skull, and his whole body is he's a giant. So he's presumed to be about 40 years old.
Wow.
So I have seen them. So I've seen the pictures in the reports and the physical one in bone air.
Do you have pictures yourself, or
Yes, on my Facebook page.
Okay.
Actually, I have a Facebook page and I have a personal page. I post more on my personal page because I have so many pages. I also have the Islands of the Giants on Facebook. So on those pages, I've posted the picture of the bone air skeleton, pictures of the skulls that were supposed to be in the Curacao Museum but are missing. So that's all. But I'm going to keep posting again because I realize now new people are coming on, and they don't know everything. So I'm going to be doing more posts about those skulls and the skeletons and connecting them to their archaeological reports so people can see for themselves.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I think people like to see pictures and stuff, and just kind of the raw evidence. Now, we talk about giants across the world. You get into things like 6 fingers, 6 toes, red hair comes in a lot. So do double rows of teeth. Is there any evidence, any of that, or?
No, aside from the cranial elongation and the teeth being very distinct, they're shovel shaped incisors, which are quite interesting, and very big. I have pictures of that. I also have them on my Facebook, and I believe also on my Instagram. Aside from that, they really were just large statured beings. Their bones were so thick that when the archaeologists when they first discovered them, with some of them within a cave that's not far from here, they wanted to saw through the bone, and they used which I don't know why, but they used a human cadaver, tried to use a human cadaver saw to get through the bone, and they couldn't cut through the bone after all those years.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 7,000 years. So they had to create another saw, invent it, so they could try to cut through the bones. I don't know why they were obsessed with cutting through the bones, but just to give you an idea of that's something that was very different about them, is the strength of their bones and the thickness of their bones. But it's interesting because, keeping with giant burials or giant evidence found across the globe, oftentimes wherever there are giants, there are little people. So in the Malmök Museum, Malmök Cemetery, there is archaeological evidence that's been uncovered of little people. And the little people were treated like, they think, according to the archaeologists, like almost like gods. It appears that they were carried around. They didn't, it looks like they just suffered, passed away from old age, that they didn't have any calamities, they didn't suffer from any disease. They appeared, due to their bone health, to be very healthy people. They're probably healthier than the general population found within the cemetery. So it's quite interesting. And now a study came out about 2 years ago of Neanderthals, and I think it was done somewhere in Europe, and I have the study. I'm not sure of the author, but they found out also the same thing. Now, Neanderthals were big people too, maybe not giants, but they were very robust, and they also had little people, and the archaeologists determined that these little people were considered very important, very special, not something that this was a hindrance or a disability, as we would perhaps call it today, but magical maybe. And they were treated like gods, like royalty. Their feet didn't even have to ever touch the ground. They were just given this amazing treatment, which is quite interesting, because also at the Malmök Cemetery, the central burial is, going back to the matriarchal part of this, it is a female. She appears to be the oldest person in the entire cemetery. She's the only one buried alone. And she's literally in the center of the cemetery, and she has the most complex burial of any of the burials within the cemetery. And she had a hunchback. So it's quite interesting that there you have these two physical anomalies going on, and these two burials, even more actually, of little people had this almost elite type burial. So maybe there was some reverence given to them due to these physical deformities that they had.
Ah, interesting. So how big were the giants and how little were the little people? Do you know like the size range there?
In the archaeological report, they do say the size. I will look it up. I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't want to misspeak. So I know they were what we would consider today little people.
Yeah.
And the archaeologists referred to them as little people. Now, giants were, at least according to the archaeological record, 8 feet tall or greater. Their skulls were very large, very heavy. The largest skull ever found was almost 3 feet long. That was found in Curacao in a cave. So these were giant people. That skull also has disappeared off the face of the earth, of course. So, but they have an archaeological report. It was written in German, and I convinced a librarian in a library at Leiden University to please send me the report. And she did. She took pictures of it and sent it to me, and I'm so thankful to her. And in that report, it documents the firsthand knowledge and the firsthand observations of an archaeologist, or actually an anthropologist, of the skull. Now, the two skulls that were in Curacao were also analyzed by the head of the Tropical Museum in Amsterdam, and that was done in the 1970s. And she flew over from Amsterdam to actually examine the skulls, and her conclusion was that they were giants. The reason why, not just from the head, one of the skulls had the hand still fused to the face, because the giants were sometimes put like this in their grave, or they were put like this in their grave, always in a fetal position facing northwest to southeast. So from an analysis of the hand, she said it was the largest hand she had ever seen in her entire career. So she also said that those were giants. So we have a lot of people who actually also physically saw these giants and were able to determine that they were giants on a scientific basis. So they were, at least in the archaeological report of the bone-air skeleton, they were at least 8 feet tall. They could have been upwards of 10 feet tall. Vespucci says in his report, if they were kneeling, they would still be taller than him if he were standing. So you get an idea of how robust these people were. And they weren't skinny people. I mean, these were big people. They weren't like NBA players, like lanky and tall. These were like, massive people that would probably really make you nervous if you saw them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here's a comment here, just real quick. Does Heather Arnold have a book and a website? So yeah, people listening, you're welcome to comment question anytime. We got about 4 people in the chat here. But yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
So I'm working on the book, and I don't have a website. I do offer tours. So if you come to Aruba, I have a tour company called Ancient Aruba Tours, and we follow the path of the giants. So that's, yes, but I am working on both a book and a website. But for now, I'm very active on social media, on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook. I'm constantly posting. So, and that's the easiest way to keep up to date with all the giant discoveries.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Anyone in the chat, welcome to comment question. This is an unannounced live stream. Just decided to do it last minute. So welcome everyone. Anyway, have these skulls and bodies been carbon dated? Has the DNA been examined or anything like that?
Yes, the DNA has, the attempts have been made to get the DNA, especially from the teeth. So, but that had not happened. But I have an interesting story. So, I went to the Bone Air Museum in October, so a year ago, and I met with the head of the museum. And again, this is a government-run museum. The employees are government employees. The head of the museum is a government employee. And I asked him if I offered him. First, I asked him if I could take a piece of the bone air skeleton, because I know someone who could do DNA testing. I offered him money for the bone, even a lot of money, and he said, "No, I can't." So I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because two people have already been through here within the past couple of weeks taking bone from the skeleton." Now, mind you, no DNA. This skeleton was found in the 1970s. The report was written in the 1980s on the skeleton. And just now, they're in 2024, or actually 2023 at that time, they are analyzing the DNA. And this skeleton has sat in the corner of this museum since the 1970s, and now people are coming. It's just bizarre. I really attribute it to me. And
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
I think that's why they were like, "Whoa, we better get to the skeleton." And so I really said to them, so I said, "Well, who came?" So one of them is this an archaeologist based in St. Martin called Jay Havasir. So he took some. Okay. So, and the other was two mysterious men from Italy, which is very bizarre, because right away I think Vatican, because that's a bone had been en route to the Vatican and from Aruba and went missing and never got, according to the Vatican, never got to the Vatican. So, so I said to the government official, is it, well, why don't you let me take some bone too? So, because I don't have confidence that we'll ever see the conclusions of the DNA evidence from these people. Who are the Italians? We don't even know. And the archaeologists. I mean, I would love if he would come out and say, yes, they were giants. The DNA is from here, and da, da, da. But I don't have I'm not fully confident. And sadly, he had to decline, because they did take a lot of bone from the skeleton, and he didn't want them to take. He didn't want any more degradation of the skeleton, which I completely agree with, but am saddened, because if I had been there a month earlier, maybe I could have done my own independent research on the DNA. And I don't recall the other part of your question. I'm sorry.
The DNA and what I say? The carbon dating. How old are these skeletons? Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So first they were carbon dated to like 3,000 years ago. Then when science caught up, then it was 5,000 years. And then more science caught up, and now it's 7,000 years. So it keeps getting older and older and older. I have always presumed they're at least 10,000 years old. The earliest evidence of people in South America was about 10,000 years ago, even 14,000 years ago in some places in Venezuela, even as far as 24,000 years ago in some places of South America. I don't know if the giants came from that area, if they're light skin, light hair, light eyes. Maybe they did. I don't know where they came from. We don't know yet. But I'm thinking that they're much older than even 7,000 years. And since the date keeps being pushed and pushed and pushed, that also makes it quite interesting too. But they left a lot around for us to look at. They left their drawings. They left huge megalithic stones.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that next, is the megalithic stuff. And if you have any pictures, or because this is something that's not on the megalith map as far as I know. Like I'm pretty into all this stuff, and I've never even heard of megaliths in Aruba, but that's it. There's so many places in the world where they are that we just aren't getting publicity about them, right? So,
and also people just say, "Oh, it's funny, because I'm from New York, and every time you see a balance stone or a dolmen, or it's from the glaciers. It's a glacier erratic." Well, you can't say that here. I'm on the equator. There were no glaciers here, so that excuse is totally out the window. And I had an archaeologist during another live stream I had done, I think a year or so ago, who was like arguing with me, so annoying, who'd never been to Aruba, never even been to the Caribbean, but he knows everything. And so he was saying, well, it's from a glacier. I said, look, everyone in the chat, I want everyone to listen to this guy. This guy just said there were glaciers at the equator. How much can you trust these people? They don't even know there weren't glaciers at the equator. So the reason, but these are huge, there are different types of megaliths here. One are huge balance stones. The balance stones are all pointing. They're pointing in the direction of a burial, of a cave, of drawings, of another stone, of a mountain. They're always pointing. So over the years, and some of them are on private property, some of them are, they people just think, oh, because I asked the people here, the local people, what did they tell you? Like, because people would always say, yeah, I have this rock at my house, it's so weird, how does it, it's not even attached to the one below. But everyone said that the teachers, they're taught that they're from volcanoes and they just fell in like this strange position facing this or facing the sunset on the equinox, and so crazy. So I ended up, have accumulated about 13 right now, and I've been mapping them on Google Earth, and they all mirror the directions of the petroglyphs. So according to the archaeological reports, all the petroglyph sites run parallel lines at intersecting Aruba from north to south, but they go from northwest to southeast, northwest to southeast, northwest to south, just like the burials. And along those same lines of the petroglyphs are all these balanced stones. So it's balanced stones here, balanced stones here, balanced stones here, balanced stones here. So it's the instance of that occurring statistically by accident, by some volcanic explosion, and everything is lined up, is like 0.0001%. So I mean, to me, it's fascinating. I don't know. Now, actually, the archaeologists do mention this. Of course, they don't give me credit, but when they do talks, they do sometimes mention the megaliths, which that's, as long as people are talking about it, I'm fine with it. There are also dolmen here that align to the winter solstice. Some align with the equinox, sunset, sunrise. There's even stones that are made in such a way that when the sun comes in from the equinox, it hits the tip of another stone and illuminates a back wall where a person seems to be going into a portal. There's a drawing. Wow. I haven't posted about that yet because that site's a little accessible and I don't want people to destroy it. So which is something I have to face here in Aruba. There's a lot of destruction of these sites, a lot of graffiti. Some of the balance stones have been buried. So yes, there are megaliths here, and they are intelligently designed, and I don't know their purpose. It's just quite interesting. What is their purpose? We don't know.
And are they carved?
And how do they do it?
Yeah. Are any of them carved stones or?
There are some stones that are carved. Some of them have like a belly button. Some of them look pregnant. Some of the stones, because they have also monoliths that were standing. A lot of them have been broken, toppled over and broken. One of them, the Rotary Club here in Aruba, took and made for their piece of with a plaque on it in town. I have a photo of that in my Facebook. But some of the stones appear to have been like pregnant, and then they put like a belly button in them. So this is a common thing, particularly in matriarchal societies, to have these stones. I call them pregnant stones, and with this little belly button put in them. Maybe they were collecting water, and it was like a fertility rite. Also in Bonaire, outside of a cave system, there is a huge piece of limestone carved into a female form, and I have pictures of that as well. She has a veil on. She's about 12 feet tall, maybe even a little taller. She's a giant. She has eyes, nose, mouth, and sometimes people leave little offerings at her feet. So yes, there are carvings, and there are also petroglyphs. There were etchings of strange faces in the stone, particularly in Hato Cave, where the largest skull was found. I have those on my Facebook too, of Hato Cave and these drawings, and they look quite alien, but I don't know. You can some of them have like headpieces on, so they were clearly wearing some sort of headpiece. At least the females, for sure.
Wow, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So that's quite a so I mean, this is the problem, is everybody is getting, I mean, you've probably had some opposition with all this. I mean, who took the bones away, and I mean, who do you see as the keepers of us knowing our ancient history, is there one group? I mean, the Smithsonian and the Vatican Library come to mind, but is there a cult group behind the suppression of our true history? Because it's seriously like everywhere I go to investigate this stuff, that's not like a main site, the government has pushed it as a hoax or systematically destroyed it. And it's like, this is not an accidental suppression of stuff. And like someone in the comments said, there's more politics in science than in religion. And I would agree that, especially with this stuff. Who do you
Yeah.
see as the keepers of this ancient knowledge?
You know, I've been following Jimmy Corsetti. I don't know if you are aware of him, and he's
Yeah,
mentioning about Göbekli Tepe and how the WEF basically took it over, the World Economic Forum, which is a bunch of sinister people that
yeah,
don't have our goodwill and happiness at hand at all. That's not the reason for their existence. So I believe ultimately, you know, people would say it's Darwinism, right? So Darwin, they want to maintain Darwinism. Well, Darwin went to Patagonia. He writes about the giants. He admits the existence of giants. He has entries. If you read his research, which I have, he speaks about the giants that he met in Patagonia, which it means large foot, of course. So it's not Darwin. No one's protecting Darwin. I mean, it's, you know, Darwin kind of, you know, you could, even scientists can blow holes in Darwin's theories, which were all they were theories.
yeah.
But I think really it's where if you, okay, for example, I went to see the Cardiff Giant. I don't know if you know about. I just saw him a couple of months ago. I haven't posted about it yet, but I plan on
Who is
doing
that?
so.
Sorry, I missed that.
Cardiff Giant. It's from Cardiff, New York.
Oh no.
This giant is now again another. It's another thing like pushed into a corner. You know, in the by the Baseball Hall of Fame. You know, it's like who's going to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame and think they're going to see a giant? So it's a huge giant. It's like I believe it's 15 feet long, stone statue of a giant. And it was in, I believe, the 1800s. It was around the time also of like the circus of P.T. Barnum and all these kind of sideshows and this type of era. And it was found on a gentleman's farm in Cardiff, New York, and it is known as the biggest hoax, you know, one of the first big hoaxes. And he allegedly buried it. He got the gypsum from, I believe it was Iowa, and brought it over with a train and had it buried in his farm and left it in there. And then a year later, he had them build a well right where he knew the giant was so they could discover the giant. And then he was shopping it around and trying to make money from it. And he was calling it a mummified giant. And it turns out it was stone and that he had actually done it. Which even the story sounds crazy, but when you hear the motivation behind it, he claims, the farmer, why he did all this, which I can't even imagine a farmer having the money to ship gypsum all the way to, I mean, it's just bonkers. He says the reason why he did it was to disprove the Bible and to prove that there weren't giants in the Bible, to mock people who believed there were giants and that there were no real giants. It was more hypothetical. And I find that interesting because my theory of why they suppress the giants, whoever they actually are, is because they don't want to admit that the Bible potentially is an accurate historical document. It's not just a holy book of, you know, how to live your life and these great stories of inspiration, but they're actually talking about historical events that actually occurred on this planet. And so I think that here, seeing that with the Cardiff Giant and marrying it with my theory of why the suppression exists was quite telling for me. So I think there is a concerted effort to really try to make the Bible look like it's a mythology, you know, and make it delegitimize it essentially.
But if they're gonna do that, then they're gonna have to make fun of the Sumerian texts. Gilgamesh was a giant. They're gonna have
Yeah.
to. I mean, you know, I mean, the Bible's just showing a small bit of what was a bigger story. Even the Book of Enoch, I think. I don't know if he talks about giants there, but like there's
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
more than just the Bible telling us this, of course. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's basically, I think, truthfully, I think it's, they're starting with the Bible. I mean, because if you look at the Bible as a historical document, then everything in it could be true, not just fables and things like
yeah,
this, actual true descriptions of things going on, so but yes, I think that people suppress the existence of giants in the other texts as well. They just say, oh, well, they made the person big in the the hieroglyphs of Egypt just because he was more powerful, and
right,
it's just that's nice, but the reality is everything else seems to be accurate in terms of the animals and the fish and the boats and this, and then all of a sudden they make a person and make him a giant person. It's a simple way to get out of admitting that there are giants or there were giants, essentially.
absolutely, yeah, it's true, and so these people, these giants of Aruba, and elongated skull people, well, one and the same in Aruba, evidently. These were not Homo sapiens sapiens. I mean, you can talk about they couldn't saw the bone uh,
Right.
with the cadaver saw, and so like we're talking about like a different species of human. Could humans do you well, I mean, apparently there's some of the stories the giants mated with humans, and
Exactly.
so I guess they're compatible with our DNA.
Right.
It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a great point, because that's one of my theories based off the genetic DNA evidence that was determined by the geneticists who came and did the analysis of the DNA of the local Aruban population. Is that people always say, well, where did they go? What happened to the giants? Where did they go? I mean, if they were here in 1499 AD, what happened to them after that? I think what happened to them, and that the genetics show, is that they started to die out, and they had to maintain themselves, mate with the average statured people here. And that's why the people here of Aruba, probably my daughter included, still have this ancient archaic DNA in them. It's from this crossbreeding of the humans, because I think the giants were just dying out, and they just bred themselves out of existence, essentially. So maybe every now and then in these stories I hear from locals of uncles from quite a long time ago, the 1800s, early 1900s. Maybe these people were still genetic throwbacks to that merger of this ancient DNA and the more modern indigenous cultures here. And I think that's really what happened. And actually, an archaeologist, or I forget their name. It's when all these archaeologists have all these different specialties now that they never had. And one of them is just like ancient DNA, I guess, but I can't recall what they called themselves. Anyway, they analyzed, and they were trying to figure out, well, what happened to the Homo naldi and the little, or the Florensis, Homo florensis, or what happened to all these people, or Homo erectus, even the Neanderthals. And I think eventually they just bred with other species. Thank goodness it was viable, and that's how they continued on with the species.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Now there's a story, and I don't want to get too much into it, but it's about this. It's about Bigfoot in
Hmm.
a small Russian town that they adopted a Sasquatch, and somebody actually mated with it. Really disgusting, if
Wow.
you ask me. Okay, whatever. They
What?
named
Yeah.
it Xana. It was named Xana, and actually had children with it. And so apparently, also, at least according to this story, and that there's a burial of the child. The child was half breed. So it appears that like all these things, these anomalous things that are on our planet, are able to breed with humans. I mean, I know that story's kind of vague, and but people can look it up. Xana, I've shared it on this show. I'm forgetting all the important details, but still, it's interesting that people can have this DNA as well. So I
Well,
guess
in
we're
the
talking
Solomon
about.
Islands too. The Solomon Islands has the same type of story.
Oh, right, yeah.
They
Right.
still fully believe in giants. I mean, there's a part of the one of the islands that they don't even go to, because it's controlled by the giants. But the giants came and they kidnapped a human baby, and they brought this baby and they raised the baby as a giant, almost they the way they describe them, they appear to be almost Sasquatch like, but I don't know enough about their physical appearance except for that they're huge people. And they ended up this she became like them essentially, and she ended up mating with a giant on in Solomon Islands and had children as well. And every now and then she would come and meet with her family, the human family,
Hmm.
the Homo sapien family, and everyone would gather around and look at her. And she died like yeah, not long ago. This half giant, half human person. So that's quite an interesting story too. And yeah, I'd love to go to Solomon Islands, but
Yeah, that would be a place that's
a hard place to get
actively,
to.
like, in present time, possibly still has giants.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
I mean, you
Yes.
can go there. I think I think I was in Fiji and I saw flights to there and Papua New Guinea. So I
Yeah.
think you can go there. But I don't know about that specific island. There's a lot of islands there, so I don't
Yeah, I
really
don't
know.
even think you can go to that island. I think
Oh
it's just
wow.
like totally off limits. It's got a huge mountain on it where there's been many UFO sightings coming in and out of that mountain. So it's I
Wow.
don't know if I want to go there, but definitely speak to the people and get their information, because I have held a cast. Also, it's on my Facebook of a Bigfoot footprint from the Himalayas. I forget. I believe it was. I forget who the researcher was. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking. But anyway, it's a cast of this. I mean, and it's like it's like this big. I thought I don't ever want to meet a Bigfoot. I never. If that's how big they are. I mean, these are massive people. And interestingly, here in Aruba, in diorite stone, we have giant footprints as well. So they're very hard to get to. I have
Oh
some
wow.
photos of them, but they are in diorite. So diorite is one of the hardest stones in the world. So did that mean the stone was softened? The mysteries abound, and really twist your mind of how these footprints got into diorite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and then that also kind of goes into, like, do you think giants might have been the worldwide megalithic builders of ancient day? I mean, because I don't know. I don't always think that 100%. I mean, I don't know, and nobody really
Right.
does probably, but, like, do you ever think that though? Like, maybe that giants built these spots because even though if they were giants, I mean, it depends on how big, still the works of places like Sacsayhuaman and
Right.
uh, the Great Pyramid core would be super hard, even if you were super big and strong. I don't know. What do you think about giants building megaliths?
Well, one place I've been to that is Easter Island, Rapa Nui. So
Oh
you
yeah,
see these moai, and you can see the delineation between the ancient megalithic builders and then the people who came after, and how they tried to replicate, but they can't even come close. I mean, the stones are smaller. They're not as well connected, or Vinapu in Easter Island is like you can't even get a piece of paper or a
right.
hair through
That's
that
the
stone. It's
wall.
like melted,
Like,
exactly.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
that temple complex actually in Rapa Nui has a lot of female moai that look like aliens. I mean, I've never seen anything so strange, and a lot of them are pregnant, which is very strange. But so you see, like how they were trying to mimic this masonry. And also when you see the moai, I mean, when you see this moai, I toured privately with an archaeologist whose parents were the ones responsible for lifting the moai that had fallen back on the Ahu or platform after a tsunami. And so, which is the Rapa Nui gets sadly a lot of tsunamis, and this tsunami knocked all the moai down, and so they couldn't figure out how to get them back up. So they worked with um, a Japanese company who decided to build equipment to specifically lift the moai, and put them on the platform. So they had to invent this equipment, put it in pieces on a container ship, get it over to the island, and not even knowing if it was going to work, and which it did, but to see how many machinations the people had to go through to get these moai back on the Ahu, you have to think to yourself, well, how did they do it? When I asked the archaeologist, well, how do you think they did it? He said, well, we, in my culture, and he was from Rapa Nui, he said, we say they walked. So, I mean, I just, you have to think to yourself, and you see the massive size, how heavy they are. There has to be something going on. Either there's a lost technological way to reverse gravity, or something and make them float. I don't know. Or were they actually physically lifting these stones? It's a massive undertaking that just even quarrying the stones themselves. I mean, even the stones here, I mean, where some of these megaliths are here in Aruba, the stones were taken from other parts of the island. They were transported. Well,
Yeah, it's
who's
always that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's always, there's a quarry site, and then there's the actual site, because the site is some kind of ley line usually, or some important
Right.
spot. As a friend of mine always says, a good spot's a good spot. And yeah, like the pyramids, they didn't quarry, they didn't build them, Egyptian pyramids, they didn't build them where they quarried them, and it just goes on and on. So they had to carve things, move them, and stack them, and it's just staggering. We're looking at a lost chapter of our history. We're looking at a lost technology, and that's why the cards are all on the table. I mean, you could go with aliens, you could go with giants, you could go with all these different anomalies, and all of it kind of makes sense and kind of doesn't. And it's like we're just stuck, because archaeology and the people that are behind hiding this are not like we're the experts that, and we're not really like the educated like through the system experts, but we're the ones, you and me and people like us, are the ones that are trying to dig up this information, because they won't do their job.
Right. They would never, like I was talking about how we opened and speaking about the archaeologist here who, specifically told me he could never speak about the giants because he would fear the humiliation from his peers and to be discredited from his peers. So he's just worried about other
Yeah.
archaeologists calling him out. He's not worried about hiding anything from the human race. That's not his concern, which it should be. He actually, a quote that he told me was, Heather, I lie every day. He knows he's lying. He knows he's not telling the truth. He knows he is holding back evidence, and he is comfortable with it in order to maintain his paycheck, his nice cushy job, his air conditioned office. I mean, I'm out in the field. It's, right now it's almost 100 degrees out. It's hard to look at these things. It's not easy. You have to struggle. You have to climb up
Yeah.
into caves and crawl and this and that, and you have to cut down these plant that we have with stickers this big, and also sometimes we have to wear bee suits because some of these places have killer beehives. I mean, it's just hardcore. And the fact it's like they let us do the work, and then they piggyback on our work and don't give us credit. It's really disheartening, but that's why we just have to keep forging forward, because the veil is, like I said, the scales are falling from people's eyes. The veil has fallen. The curtain has been drawn back, and so we see now what there is. An orchestrated attempt at maintaining a narrative, not wanting to step outside the box for fear of retribution from their peers, or being, mocked by
Yeah.
these, holier than thou people. And it's quite disheartening because it holds humans back, and they should be the ones, moving us forward through the past.
Yeah.
But they are actually holding us back
Yes,
on
they
purpose.
are. Yes, totally they are. And it's very frustrating. Like, if someone wants to really make their mark and really make history, why not go against their peers and do something awesome and uncover some hidden pyramid somewhere, or some hidden site that links this global chapter of our past that is obviously in hidden in plain sight. I mean, like, why not go against the grains so you could be remembered as an awesome archaeologist instead of some guy in his office sitting there like I know I so I'm doing a documentary, as you know, and some of the listeners may know that puts me out there in the field doing some pretty dangerous stuff at times and going through bushes and with no trail and finding spots. Like, we're doing all this hard work, and they're
Exactly.
just sitting in an office somewhere just pleasing their peers, and it's
Right.
ridiculous. It's stupid.
I mean, you
Yeah.
even look at their archaeological papers, and it's like regurgitation of other people's. They're not. There's no real new field research going on. So they're just like, oh, okay, let me take a paragraph from here and target, and I just have to cite them and tie it all together, and then I'm the author of a study.
Yeah.
And that's what I see happening. I see it happening here. I see it happening in the United States, and it's just this regurgitation of approved ideas, and then putting their name on it and whoever sponsored it, because there's always a sponsor. And so that's like how they're operating. I mean, they're just on autopilot, and it's very frustrating. But you look at Graham Hancock. That's a perfect example with his series, which I actually think season 2 is even better than season 1, particularly because it's the Americas, which I'm here, so
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. I mean, but look at how he's being attacked, and these archaeologists are trying desperately. Well, why is everyone listening to them, or what? I mean, now they're piggybacking on him and creating YouTube videos discrediting him, trying to get some of his audience over to them, but it's not resonating with people, their ideas, what they're saying. It's a collective unconsciousness that we can tap from, that we know, wow, what they're saying, it sounds so stupid. Like, here is a balanced stone. There's no glacier that brought the stone here at the equator. It's not attached to the one underneath. So Scott Walter was recently here, and he said, well, some of it could be erosion and the way the stone erosion. Yeah, it could. But if they're not attached, or one of the stone's rocks, for example, like, how are we attributing that just to erosion? There's mysteries here, and that's very annoying to me. But people are waking up and they're saying, well, it's what the archaeologists say just doesn't even make sense, and because now people have access to you and I and others who are doing this phenomenal research with our own money on our own time, and taking all the bullets. I think it's time that people start to wake up and have the guts to really say, well, I don't agree with what the archaeologist is saying, but it makes more sense what Loomis is saying or Heather is saying. And it does. I mean, we're seeing with our eyes. We're experiencing it. We're going to these places. We're not. And there are some places I mentioned to the archaeologist here. I mean, the one archaeologist, he's never even been to the places. This is a small island. I mean, it's just baffling to me how you can even write about or try to discredit me when you've never even seen it.
Yeah.
With your eyes, you've never because you have to climb up a hill and you're on all fours and it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard. But then you get to a cave and there are monkeys buried there, in elite burials. That how could you not want to see something like that? And he was
I
just
know. I don't even think they got into this kind of information because they were interested in the stuff like we are at all, like, in the first place. But there's a collective human curiosity about our our human story that we don't know, and that's why people are gravitating toward people like us, Graham Hancock, and all these people that are doing this work because they know there's more. There's something just intuitively they know there's something more to our story than what we've been told, and this starts to really make sense. We can't just hide all this information anymore, and I feel like that they've tried every little angle they can. They like to throw that people like us are racist because we are,
Yes.
not looking at the indigenous culture currently. And it's like, well, the way I look at it is land, and there were people that have always come to land, and some people, for example, the Incas say that they did not build those huge sites. It's not their construction. So we have to look at an older. If it was the Incas, we'd be like, yeah, wow, what'd they do?
Right.
But it
Yeah.
wasn't them. They admit it. They say it was Viracocha, the god of their,
Right.
and it's always the gods or something. So we have to look further. And you know, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I'm just like, it's just me ranting here. But like, seriously, it's like we're there. they're trying to throw everything at it like we're racist because
Right.
we're it's like what this is just looking at truth, and truth doesn't care what people think. Truth is truth, you know.
Right. I mean, if you find a skeleton, it's easy to tell if it's a male or if it's a female. It's not, transgender, for example. And some there's like, I mean, it's easy to be determined. That's how you do it. There are physical differences in the male and the female body that in
Yeah.
ancient skeletons you can detect right away, and that's how you can determine just with sight. Even you can detect a male and a female skeleton. So it's to inject all these I don't even know, like sociological references into the science of analysis of skeletal remains is just the craziest thing I've ever heard. Of course, people have called me out because I'm white. How don't listen to her, she's white. So now all white people don't. I mean, really, it's not important to me to know my human story. I'm a human. I want to know what went
Yes.
on our earth. This is all of our earth. And if you're just going to say no, the only people who can tell the story are the indigenous people, well, okay, get going then. Where
Yeah.
is it? Come on, go with me. I'll show you where these places are, but you better put on your hiking boots, And then
Yeah.
okay, and then no one wants to go. It's 105 degrees. Let's not do it. So I mean, it's and yet again, sometimes people are taking our stuff and calling it their own and not crediting us, and it's very frustrating because it's a real dumbing down of the population. If you're trying to discredit people based on their sex or their color or where they're from, well, then you're only listening to, again, approved voices. And if you're only listening to approved voices, there's narrative control. And if there's narrative control, then you're not going to get the full story. It's just never going to happen that way.
Yes, great point there. Yes. And I like this point too. If we can't have honesty about the past, can we honestly know the present and the future? And I think that we have what you call, well, um, a, a mentor of mine, someone that I listen to a lot, this guy named Mark Passio. I don't know if you know him, but he did a series called Cosmic Abandonment, which we all have this abandonment of our past because we don't understand this origin. There's something running through humanity that we know we're kind of missing from our cosmic parents in a way, and
Right.
so there's a lot to say about that, and it's like, wouldn't you want to know the truth, and so the we don't, because I think that might be one of the reasons why humanity is so messed up in a lot of ways, is that we don't know our origins and our past, so we reflect that in our behavior here in the present,
Right.
and it, so
Good
causes a
point.
lot of
Yeah.
problems. So I feel like
I
this is some of the most important information on earth that we are trying to uncover. We're trying to really uncover our human story.
Exactly. That's exactly what I keep saying. I just want to add to our human story. And, I have archaeological evidence. I have reports. I have a physical skeleton I can take you to. So I mean, I don't understand why there's still this, people with blinders on and choosing to just listen. Oh, well, you didn't study archaeology. You're not an archaeologist. How can you? Well, archaeology is a very new it's a very new profession. It's a new study. It only came out in the 1920s, and the first courses were at Columbia University. And the reason being was because it was designed so that when they were doing archaeological digs, not only would they have full control over whatever they uncovered, but they also could figure out how to categorize things, how to do digs in a way that was more uniform. So they were all using the same uniform techniques to uncover these artifacts and these ancient sites. And that's essentially what the entire field of archaeology, that's how it started. It's just basically a way to categorize and excavate. And so now it's become that they were like gods. I don't know what happened. Like all of a sudden now they're like gods, and we have to just listen to everything they say, and no one else can have an opinion, and no one else has the brain power to look at an archaeological report and read it. It's like it's the craziest thing ever. And we're able to make inferences between different cultures, and we're able to do that because we're traveling to these places. We're physically seeing these places. Most of the archaeologists aren't traveling to those places. They're not physically
Right.
seeing them, and they're
Yeah.
grabbing from other papers and glomming on and making a paper and putting their name on it. So I think we have more credibility in a lot of sense than a lot of the archaeologists.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I go to these sites, I bring things that they probably wouldn't. My friend has a tri-field meter, which
Yes, I bring
measures
my
energy.
trifield unit.
Yeah,
The
and I
trifield.
bring a compass and a magnet, and I see if things stick. I see if
Yeah.
energy comes off. Archaeologists aren't doing that. They're not looking at the energy, or so I feel like we have a fuller uh,
Of course.
uh, picture than they do oftentimes, and
Right.
actually going to these sites. I mean, I don't come from any money, but I save up my money and I travel to these places because I know that you can't just sit at a desk and go, "Oh yeah, that is the Giza pyramids." It's like, no, no, no. You have to go there and you have to take it in. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I know, like for me, that's more important than buying new clothes or eating at fancy restaurants. But I don't know. But that's just what I'm interested in. So
It's
yeah.
funny you mentioned about the trifield meter. I have one as well, and I went to Chaco Canyon to witness the summer solstice sunrise at Casa Rinconada Kiva, and I
Wow.
put the trifield meter onto the stone of the kiva as the sun was illuminating and coming to making this square on the back wall. It was quite powerful, and the meter started going crazy. So the stones were kind of increasing power. They were like power, holding power from the sun and the light show that was happening. There was some interaction going on, and it was actually invigorating these stones. I mean, electrifying them in a sense. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. I was so shocked. And that's, yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, an archaeologist, I mean, that is a scientific test. That the trifield meter it's an expensive piece of equipment. So I mean, an archaeologist would never do that. They would never think to do that. I've taken an old school compass by the balance stone in North Salem, New York, and you take the compass there and it spins around. It cannot find north. Um,
Wow.
those are things that an archaeologist, like you said, is not going to do, and they're never going to get the full picture of what's going on if they're not doing things like that. But they should be using our information too and crediting us in their research as well, because we are adding to the research, and we are probably adding to the research more than they have in the past 25, 30 years.
Oh, absolutely. My friend Triffin, unlocking the code. Shout out to Triffin. He's in Australia. He took a trip to a site far away that I won't disclose it because it's his stuff, but to see if it aligns with the winter solstice. These guys aren't doing that either. They're not doing any of that stuff. So it's like we're further investigating things and not just writing things off as hoaxes all the time and stuff. So
Right,
yeah,
exactly. I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it at least I this is the fun work to me. Like sometimes I'm talking about other stuff on this show that's like kind of dreadful, but we all need to know the truth too. But this is the fun work. This is what excites me and makes me like feel like, yeah, this is uncovering our past from our corner of the world.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is fun. And that's why it's a shame that archaeologists aren't more fun. I think
yeah,
that's the whole problem. They're not fun like us, so they don't want to do these things. But,
no,
I mean, I always say the giants found me, I didn't find them. And that's really what happened. So these sites also find you. You don't find them, they find you. And it's hard to explain to someone who doesn't do this, but it's really true. And I think a lot of researchers feel the same way.
absolutely, I do. Yeah. Well, we're rounding up on about almost an hour and a half, so I was gonna cut it soon. But how can people find your work, and what's the best? You said you have Instagram and Facebook, maybe those sites. I found you on X, so and I'm just joined X, so I don't have anything on there yet. But you guys can follow me in the chat. But yeah, uh anyway, how can people find your work, and what is something you have coming in the future? That do you have any like groundbreaking new studies or anything that you might be gonna do or anything like that? Or
Well, yes, the newest stuff is about this ancient burial ground, and that I believe that all these bodies were collected until they became skeletons, and then there was a massive ritual of death that occurred one time a year when they painted the skulls and then buried them. And I will write more about that because I think it's actually exactly what happened. I'm also going to start reposting some of my older stuff because I have so many new followers. Thank you all. But like about the Bonaire skeleton and attaching it to these archaeological reports so you can see for yourself. And I'm going to start to repost that information as well. And now hopefully the temperature here will drop a little since it's almost November tomorrow. So I'm hoping that then we can start to do a couple more hikes. You know, the weather is just at 8 in the morning, it's already 95 degrees. So it's
Wow.
really, really, it's, and some of these hikes that I want to do, for example, there's a couple of caves I need to get to are all day hikes with no shade in the desert, you know, so you really have to do it, start early and hope you don't pass out and run out of water along the way. So I'm going to be doing those as we get into the winter months, because then I can really show you. For example, I'm going to go to the exact place where Vespucci came and met with the giants. There's an exact spot. Again, it's a pretty hardcore hike. Interestingly, there was a recent archaeological dig that went on at a shell midden that is there, and actually, I think I posted the photos, but I'm going to repost that as well when I do that hike, and show you all exactly where Vespucci entered. So again, I tried to do that hike during this hot season, and I started to get dizzy, and then you still have to hike back, you know, and so I had to turn around and go back, but now I'm determined to do it. I might even rent a kayak and try to get it from another angle. So stay tuned. Please look at Heather L. Arnold on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. That's where I'm posting all of the time. And eventually, yes, my book will come out. I know a lot of people are asking for it. I'm so sorry. You know, I just moved from the United States. It was the most craziest move of my life, the most stressful thing of my life. Plus, I have a daughter, so it was a lot. But now I'm finally feeling settled and really, starting to find the time now and making the time. So I'll be doing a great amount of research moving forward, and also reposting and moving up on my timeline some of the older studies that I have done, so I can introduce them to people.
Great.
Also,
Great.
tours here. I have a tour company. So
yes.
anyone for Aruba, I do 4-hour private tours in the footsteps of the giants. It's called Ancient Aruba Tours. It's focused on the archaeology of Aruba, and I'll take you to sites that literally there's no one on this island who even knows about them.
Well, cool. Yeah, that would be great. I would like to do that someday when I get that direction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me know. I'm here.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and go over and support Heather's work. Like I say, we're doing the work. These people are not, and we're trying to uncover the mystery of our human origins and human just life period. And I encourage everybody to do that from your backyard, and stay tuned soon for the documentary that I'll be releasing, Sacred Sites. So everybody, thanks for joining us, and thanks everybody in the chat, and have a great day. All right. Okay.